Hey there, Prairie Plant Girl here. Today I'm out and I'm going to try and take advantage of a little bit of nice weather to get my onions planted and a few cabbages that I have started. So they're all going to go in the same bed here together, and I also have garlic down at the other end of this bed, and I might pop a few gladiolus corms in around the garlic as well. We'll see where I get to today. But I wanted to just go through the onions with you real quick. I started these indoors from seed, I think in the end of January, and they're doing quite well. They're looking great. They need to get out, and I just kind of mass sow them into one container, so there's dozens and dozens of onions in here, and I'll show you how I take them apart and get them planted. And then I'm going to put the onions down the middle of this bed, and then I'll put the cabbage around the outside perimeter, because the onions will go a long season with very little care growing in the garden, and the cabbage I'll want to be able to get to pick cabbage worms off of, or harvest, or just whatever care they need. So this is just an 8 by 4 foot raised garden bed. It's raised about a foot off the ground, and it's just filled with a combination of like my own homemade compost, purchased manure, compost over the years, and peat moss. And this bed also has some vermiculite in it as well. Like I said, I think I'll go down the middle with the onions. I have two varieties here. One is Ailsa Craig, and then I just have a few save seeds. So I'll worry about the save seed last and try and focus on the Ailsa Craig first, because that's the main one I want to get in. So let's get these onions pulled apart and get this bed planted. So when I mass plant the onions like this, I just have a small plant tag down the middle there that I've just used to separate the save seed from the Ailsa Craig. So I don't know if you probably can see it there, but it's just a bright pink line in the soil there, so I'll know which is which. And then I just had made little furrows in the soil in this planting container, and just, like I said, just mass planted the onions in there. So then I'm just going to dump it out, and my little pink tag stayed in there. So now I'm just going to try and pull a chunk of the onions off from the rest, and we'll work with those to start. So I just take the onions, and it's a big root mass, and sometimes they're really tight together and sometimes they're not, and I just pull them apart individually until I have a nice amount to start working with. And I don't worry about tearing the roots or hurting the roots. There's going to be some roots attached, and that's fine. They'll all grow up, you know, as long as they have a little bit of root. Now, some that are really spindly like this, I might just put to the side and save those for last, because I have quite a few here. Probably won't need them all, and I'd rather have the bigger, stronger plants going. And then I just take my onions, and I just take my finger and I set the onion on the soil, and I'm just going to push it down to get the roots in, bury it. As they grow, you may need to pull the soil away from the bulb of the onion to help it grow larger. My soil is pretty loose, so usually it's not a big deal, but you don't want to pile a lot of mulch up around them. But you just want to get them just basically so that the roots are in the ground. And then I take an onion here, that's my distance. So just push another one in. And they might not even stand up for you. These are actually standing up today, but they might just fall right over. And that's fine. They'll stand up as they get stronger. Just push them in, cover them over. And I'll probably have room for about 3 rows here between the cabbage. Now, onions are great because you can pop them in anywhere in your garden. They need a lot of good fertile soil to grow, and nice consistent water, but they don't want to be in wet soil. So if you are growing something that needs a lot of moisture, this might not be something you want to grow beside them. But otherwise, they'll pop in, they take up very little room, And you can put them in beside almost anything that you're growing and tuck them between rows of things to grow up. The only thing I found last year, I grew them with my carrots, and I found the carrot tops kind of knocked over the onions as I was trying to get in and divide and thin my carrots. My onions wound up getting kind of bent over, and that will signal the end of growth for your onions. So you might want to be aware of plants like that where you're going to be digging around and working around a lot, where the leaves might be getting tangled up in that with the onions. And maybe that's not the place for the onions to be. So I'm just going to work down the row of my onions and get them all laid in here. And then I'll water them in really well. And about once a month or so, I'll come through with just an all-purpose organic fertilizer and give them a good fertilizing of just a side dressing of the fertilizer, because they are heavy feeders, or a top dressing of my own compost. But I find you have to be careful if you're top dressing with compost, because again, you don't want to pile up too much soil or mulch or anything around the onion bulb, because that can prevent it from really growing out and bulbing up nice. So you just want to be aware of how much you're piling up around them. But they'll just stay here and keep growing until they've got a nice big bulb, or until I want some onions and just pull them out. You can harvest your onions at any time. And I could take these. I could take this onion in right now, cut it up, and use it for green onions. So anytime you're ready for an onion, just go out in your garden, pull one up, and use it for whatever you need. Or leave them until you're ready to harvest them at the end of the season. They have nice big bulbs, and the tops have they'll usually bend over, and the first few leaves will start to dry up at the bottom, and then your onions are done their growth cycle. You can leave them and let a few more leaves dry up if you like, if you're going to have dry weather. If it's going to be really wet out, you might want to get them harvested earlier, and then lay them out where they have good air circulation, or hang them upside down with air circulation somewhere where it's warm but out of direct sun, and that'll help them to store the last bits of energy from the greens here, and they'll store better that way. And then you can just put them in a nice, cool, dark area to store through the winter. Different varieties of onions store better than others, so that's something to look at when you're looking at the labels and picking your variety of onion to grow. So I'm just going to keep going through here and getting my onions planted. So that only took maybe half of the Ailsa Craigs that I had there. So I'm going to go through and try and do one more row on either side of this drip line, and that should still leave room for a row of cabbage on either side of this bed here. So that's 55 Ailsa Craig onions in this bed here. So I still have the saved seed, probably another 18 or so Ailsa Craigs that I can pop in between other plants in the garden. And I already planted my Valencia the other day over in another bed. So I'll show you those, and then I'll water these in and get the cabbage planted. If you recall, the other day I planted the celery, and I planted up some lettuce and spinach and beets and kale, and I think that's all. But I also came back later in the day after supper and put some onions in the ground down here. So that's my Valencia onions there. And you can see maybe they're looking a little more like they're standing up. It's been about 2 days now, so most of them are looking a little perkier than the ones I just planted. And it looks like they need water, so I'm going to water these as well when I water the others. Now we are supposed to get rain. Pretty much every day is forecast rain for the rest of the week. So as long as I can keep these watered in well for today, they should get watered in well the rest of the week. The temperatures won't be too hot or too cold for them, and they should settle in quite well. I'm gonna go get the Valencias done real quick, and then I'll get the cabbage in. Okay, so I have a hybrid cabbage that's called Minuet. a Catarina cabbage and a stonehead cabbage. So the Catarina being smaller doesn't need a lot of space between it. I think like a foot is all they need, so I'm just gonna be going about every foot with them. And then I'll put a couple of the minuet, and I'm not sure if I'll have room. The stonehead might go on the other side of the bed, but that'll leave me some open spaces that I can come in later and do some succession planting with some other varieties that I already have started that are just wee babies, and hopefully get a few crops of cabbage off at different times throughout the season instead of having one big crop of cabbage all at once. Cabbage is a heavy feeder again, so it's good to have a good fertile bed. Like I said, this bed has lots of good homemade compost in it. It's pretty well amended, and I think for the early part of the season here, while they're just getting going, they should have enough nutrients in here for what they need. I am going to put a little bit of lime in each planting hole. The lime will help ward off clubroot in the cabbage and everything in the brassica family, I believe. Just have that little extra lime in there. They don't like a high pH, so that just helps amend it all. So I'm just going to dig a pretty good sized hole. I'm going to plant them a little bit deeper than they're growing right now. So I'm just going to dig down, see how deep are they in there. And I'm going by an emitter on the drip tube here, so that when the drip is turned on, they'll have water coming right to them. I'm just going to put a light sprinkle of the lime in the hole, put some more soil on there. Some people put the lime right straight onto the roots. I usually just put it right in the hole. Pull my cabbage out, and so you can see how it's growing. I'm going to plant it. So right now it has all this stem above the soil. I'm going to plant it up to these cotyledon or seed leaves, and might even get them buried in the soil as well. So that'll give the plant extra support, and it won't hurt them at all. It's not going to help get any more roots or anything on the plant, but it'll just keep it from flopping around in the wind and give it nice support to grow. So let's do the exact same thing again. For the other Catarina, I think I have 2 of each variety here. So a little bit of lime in the hole, mix some soil with it. And so I just grew these from seed. I started them inside in my grow room under lights, and then they've been out in my greenhouse and hardening off outside for the last, I think, close to a month now. And they're ready to get out. Now I have had flea beetles out already in my garden, so I will be covering these with mesh net. I just have some little tunnels with net that'll work well for this particular application here, and that'll just help keep the flea beetles in control a little bit. Nothing seems to keep them completely off, but that'll help. And I'm not worried about the onions being close to the cabbage, because they don't take up much space, and they can kind of grow between the leaves of the cabbage, and the cabbage can grow around them easily, and it won't be an issue. Okay, now I want the minuet. This has a very hairy leaf on it. It'll be interesting to see how it grows. It's not growing quite as tall as the others, so I won't filled the hole back in a bit so it wasn't quite too deep. If you see white speckles on the leaves, that's because I've just put some diatomaceous earth. I had sprinkled some on them a few days ago just to kind of help with the flea beetles. And then I'm going to skip a drip emitter here just to put a little extra room between these, because I can't remember how big the minuet get, but I think they're bigger than the Catarina, so I want to make sure they have enough room to grow. Just put a little tag here. Nice, so I'll put the stone head on the other side, and I'll again space them out a little bit further between, with like an emitter between each of them. And then we'll get some tunnels and net these guys up. So here's my first emitter. So take a little spot here. Sprinkle in some lime. And grab this stonehead cabbage out. So we'll leave an emitter. Get through all my onion mess here. Leave an emitter. There's the next emitter. There, so I have 6 cabbages and what did I say? Something like 55 onions planted in this bed now. I think that's pretty good. I'm gonna get some net. I don't need to worry about netting the onions. If you have problems with root maggots, then you might want to net your onions just to keep the flies from the maggots coming over. Or I think you can lay paper collars around. If you lay paper collars around each onion, or around each onion plant or between the plant rows, I think that also helps because the flies lay their eggs in the ground around the base of the onion, and then when the little worms or maggots that come out of the eggs are born, they'll tunnel into the onions. So if you lay the paper out, then the eggs dry up on the paper and the flies can't lay the eggs right in the soil, so you won't get the root maggots. That's my understanding. I haven't really had to deal with the root maggots a lot, so it's not something I'm very knowledgeable about, but that's my little bit of knowledge that I'll pass on to you in case that's an issue for you. So I'm gonna get a fresh watering can of water, water these in and net them up, and maybe pop a few glads in. The wind is getting up, so maybe it's gonna push some of those rain clouds in a little sooner. So I have all the onions and cabbage watered in, and I just thought, I don't think I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I should let you know that I'm in southern Saskatchewan, Canada, and I'm growing zone 4, and it's the end of April, so I have about 3 weeks before my average last frost. But it's perfectly safe to put these plants out. They can take a light frost, they'll be just fine. And I will be netting them, which will actually help them a little bit if we had anything more than a light frost. Before I put the nets up, I'm gonna just pop a few gladiolus bulbs around the back end of this bed where the garlic is growing, and they'll grow up and I can use them for cut flowers before the garlic is ready. And I don't think they'll hurt each other. I've never tried growing glads around my garlic before, but I don't think it should be a problem. I've already pre-sprouted some that are in my greenhouse, and now I'll just get some going out here. So I can't plant the garlic right up to the edge of my raised beds in my growing zone here because it would just freeze and rot off. So I have a little space here where the glads can pop in, and hopefully I'll have a nice little show of glads that I can use for cutting. I'm just putting them about this deep into the soil. This one's already started to sprout. Pre-sprouted itself. Got tired of waiting for me, I guess. It's a good rock garden too. I don't know how well you can see the garlic coming up here. And it's starting to come up. So there, I think that was close to a dozen gladiolus, and the soil is actually fairly moist down at this end. I will put a little bit of water more on the garlic quick here. And then, do you like my ski pole? Got this at the secondhand store. I use it in the garden for turning compost, you know, marking off areas in the garden. Whatever works. Anyway, I'll water in the garlic one more time here, and that'll get out to the gladiolus too while I'm doing it. And then I'm going to put the tunnels up over the cabbage to make sure that trying and keep the flea beetles out of there. There's no butterfly moths or cabbage moths out yet at this point in time, but it won't be long before they're here, so it doesn't hurt to have that protection on them already set up. And then I think my time in the garden today will be done, and time to get some other jobs done. But thanks for coming along with me today in the garden. It's always nice to share what I'm doing with other people. And I love to hear in the comments down below what you're doing in your garden these days. So make sure you pop down in the comments and let me know what's happening in your garden. And we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.